This podcast may contain adult themes and strong language.
You stepped onto Busker's corner.
There's a street level witchcraft war with people that are homeless and people that travel by foot or whatnot. You know, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not, it's there. And that was the world he was pulling me into.
We'll be right back with the rest of this story on this fantastic first episode of Season 2 of Busker's Corner podcast. I'm your host, Robert, joined by my co-host and producer, Fable.
Hey there, Fable here, welcoming you to an all-new season. Really excited to share all these great new stories with you. On this episode, we bring you 2 stories with the theme of On the Road. Tales of travel, quests, journeys, and of course a good bit of street performance. Traveling is a really relevant topic when it comes to being an entertainer or performer of any sort. As musicians / buskers, being on the road and making a living really go hand in hand, which Robert and I definitely know a lot about.
Fable and I have been married for 12 years and have been busking together for the last 7 years. We've been traveling the West from Tucson, Arizona to Bellingham, Washington, usually on the road 8 to 10 months a year. Living at first in a pickup truck camper I built myself, and later in a conversion van, we've met some really wonderful, artistic, super cool people. But this first story is from a friend I've known over 25 years, and I am happy to present to you a magician, fire-breathing illusionist, and outrageous sideshow performer. Here is a very strange traveling story by Captain Stephen Strange, previously known as Dr. Reverend Stephen Strange. We call this story Disappearing Act.
So it started with troubled youth and people not knowing what to do with me. I was a ward of the state. I got myself emancipated, and then I didn't have any direction after that. I was super paranoid about any institution because I had just grown up in them. And I was super anti-establishment, anti-consumer, anti-material, anti. And so I just decided that I was gonna disappear. That was the best option for me. And so I just started hitchhiking, moving across the country. It started with, I was being given options that were terrible. And so I said, how about this? There's this flyer for an event in Lake Pyramid, Nevada. Turns out it was one of the first Burning Mans. And I was like, how about you give me bus fare to this thing and then I won't bother you no more. And they did. Headed to that, my bus partner promptly traded our bus tickets for bunk drugs. So we were suddenly caught in Salt Lake City, Utah. Made our way to San Francisco over a period of time. Got into the LSD trade. We started buying bulk and mailing, and then started laying and mailing. That was kind of the thing we were doing. With that much acid, you start thinking you're going to experiment with your own brain chemistry is what you start doing, and you start taking as much of it as possible. A fellow hoodlum was like, you know what makes that acid stronger is a little meth. Throw a little meth in there, that'll really open up your third eye. And we were like, oh, let's try that out, you know. And then over time, you forget the acid part, and you're just doing the meth part, and then now you're a meth head. And so I got sent away by my fellow humans because they didn't want me to get in any more trouble, because you start losing money and drugs when you're on meth, and that creates problems. That ended my career, and I ended up in Nashville, where I ran into some people who really got into my stories about being in the acid trade and wanted me to hook them up. So they basically funded a safari for us to go out to San Francisco and hook them up with all my old contacts. On the way out there, I meet another homeless guy at a food court in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I can't explain it. It was just one of the fucking weirdest moments. It's one of those things where, like, I was bordering on atheism till I met this guy. And he didn't convince me to not be an atheist because he was a holy man, but just because my time with him, I experienced so many things that to this day I can't quite explain. This guy, I meet him, and at the time I'm a train hobo, and when you're doing a lot of train hopping, there's sort of like, you belong to a club of other types of hobos, and so you all kind of have insignia that let other train guys know that you're a train guy. And one of the insignias is your tin cup on a carabiner on your pack or on your belt is a pretty good giveaway. And so this guy had his tin cup, and he had his other things. His pack was set up right. You know, he was carrying things right. He had a walking stick. He had all these little things, telltale signs. I was like, oh, this is a train guy, right? And you don't run into a lot of train hobos these days. So when you get a chance to have a conversation with a train hobo, you fucking take that chance. I had a plate full of tacos, and he comes out of the restroom. I invite him to sit down and have one of my tacos, and he goes, no, but I will sit down and talk to you. So this guy sits down, and he says a bunch of shit that's just mind-blowing. Like, he knows about me somehow. We've never met. He knows about me. He knows who I am. He knows about my life. It's weird. He doesn't know specific names. And yeah, it's probably some sort of cold reading, like, mentalism trick he's pulling on me. You know, I was young at the time. You know, I didn't know about these things yet. It was weird. And he's like, I think you would be perfect for my act I'm putting together. And he explains this act to me that is a beautiful thing, what he described. It's still to this day, I think, was a beautiful thing. And I say, well, yeah, I can't. And he goes, do you know how to dance? I go, no. And he goes, do you know how to sing? I go, no. And he goes, do you know how to juggle? I go, no. And so he's like, well, you're perfect. And I'm like, I don't understand how that's even possible, but whatever. So let's do this. And I go, yeah, I can't. I'm already basically leading a safari out to San Francisco for, you know, drug purposes. And he goes, oh, I live out that way sometimes. I have connections out there. He goes, here, check this out. When you're done doing your who's a what's it, go to the juggling shop at Pier, what is it, 54, 45, what is it, one of those numbers? It's like, yeah, and ask for me. So I go, all right, fine. Get to San Francisco, I'm done with my thing. I don't know what to do with myself. So I go down to that juggling shop, and I walk in. I ask if they know this guy, and they go, nah, we never heard of him. And then they say, hey, you should juggle. And I go, yeah, well, I don't. And they go, yeah, but you should. And I go, yeah, but I don't. And they go, but you could. And I go, yeah, but I don't. And then they go, catch. And they threw a ball at me. And I caught the ball. And they go, yeah, you could juggle. And I go, yeah, but I don't. And they go, yeah, but you could. And they kept throwing balls at me. And then they started calling me names. Rude names. And declaring that basically I wasn't man enough to try to juggle. And they started insulting me and my inability to even try to juggle. Yeah, I was young and easily baited, and I was like, fine. And so I threw a couple up in the air, and I was like, there. See, I can't juggle. And they go, yeah, but you tried, which means you could. And I was like, whatever. And then they go, by the way, we know exactly who you're talking about. He told us you'd be coming by, and said if you're by at this time tomorrow, he'll be here. From that moment forward, I am basically his partner, hitchhiking hobo partner. He proceeds to tell me some fucked up shit. Basically, he's a messiah. The government is keeping him in control with his crack addiction. They know that he blew up Chernobyl with his mind, right? That's fine. I just want to learn how to juggle, right? This guy's a master juggler. He's teaching me how to juggle while we're traveling together. I'm learning how to juggle. But I'm also learning how to read the tarot. He's teaching me how to read the tarot. He's also teaching me how to bust clouds with my mind, which is not a thing, but you can do it. So yeah, it taught me a lot of stuff, and he put together this show that involved sacred geometry, mystical color theory and the costuming, sacred geometry and the dance steps, sonic hypnotism and the words and the songs and the repetition of the tones, and all this big magical formula that was just beautiful. He wouldn't tell it to me in any kind of order that I could possibly steal it from him, which he said exactly that way. He said, I'm not going to teach this to you in any possible order so you can't steal it from me, which is really kind of difficult when you're trying to learn how to do a thing. This was part of the end of our relationship. I got very frustrated and like, I don't know what the fuck's going on anymore. The whole sum of the parts of this beautiful thing was just to make money. That was it. Just to generate money. And that kind of also was a problem for me. Broke my heart at the end, where I was like, this doesn't do anything but make this guy rich, apparently, if it ever works. And then I realized the reason I was perfect was because I was a young, handsome, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy who could be accused of being in like the DiCaprio, Christian Slater vibe or whatever, and I was just bait. Basically, I was just bait. I was bait to get other people to join his insane crusade to generate him fame and fortune through some magical thing. And then it got to a point where he was just like trying to be Pinocchio's slave master in the story Pinocchio. That's where he started going, where he was just like, well, you need to go out and make us some money. Go out and do some performing, make us some money. And then I was just like, look, dude, we're partners. Like, that's what you said. Like, we're partners. Yeah, you're teaching me, I'm learning, but I'm also working. We're partners, right? And then it got to a point where he's like, all right, you just need to have sex with me then. And I was just like, okay, well, that was never part of the deal. And what was crazy is I realized right at that point that he thought he could say that because he thought he had me. And then when I realized he thought he had me, I realized what that meant was that like he had been brainwashing me. Like he had me isolated and was not letting me have caffeine, was not feeding me properly, you know, and like all these things, putting me under weird pressures, and that's what was happening. So I saw some crazy shit with this guy. I quit performing because I was rather traumatized by the relationship and the abuse. Yeah, I wanted nothing to do with that man or anything that we did together or any of that. I mean, I really felt like I was like, you know, in danger at that time. And when you realize you've been brainwashed because you trusted somebody, it just really kind of tears you up. He had me basically paranoid that I was going to be disappeared. Like I was just gonna cease to exist and nobody was gonna give a fuck. And so at first what I did is I tried to not be on the radar, right? I tried to not get photographed anywhere. I didn't have my name on any paperwork. Like I'd always find a way to like have somebody else be the renter and I'm the roommate or whatever, or I didn't have a bank account until I started my own business in my 20s. So I was super paranoid and worked for cash only, would rather work for trade. And then it was just weird. One day I was just like, holy fuck. If his goal was to erase me, I just did it. Like I did it for him. I erased myself. I don't exist anywhere to anybody. And if you were gonna like actually kill me, this would be the perfect time because nobody's gonna miss me. Nobody's gonna know. And then all of a sudden I just was like, fuck that. I'm not gonna kill myself for this person. You know, I'm not gonna erase myself I'm not gonna do the work. I'm not gonna go get the switch. I'm not gonna go grab the belt. No, you're gonna have to chase me across the yard with the belt. You know what I mean? And that's when I was just like, I need to live as loudly as possible. I need to make myself the biggest, weirdest creature you've ever met. And that way everybody remembers me and nobody can disappear me because the minute I'm gone, people will be like, what the fuck happened to him? And, but that's how I started street performing.
Well, that is quite a story, Captain Stephen Strange. Thank you for sharing. There are some very dark people out there who want to steal your soul, that's for sure. You gotta be careful who you trust, especially on the street. Our next story is from a performance poet and writer who mostly resides in Phoenix, Arizona. But here is his story of where performance and road trips collide. Please welcome Brian Flatgard with his epic traveling saga we call 3 Poets, 1 Car.
I am Brian Flatgard. I am a writer and poet and not doing that full time now, but back in the day, I committed my life to poetry in the early 90s. Yeah, so the story I want to tell is like from those days. My busking adjacent experience, it was me, my friend George Tirado, and David Laspaluto. Kind of all this went down when I was living in Phoenix, and I'd been in Phoenix maybe 6 years. This was maybe my second year of self-declaring myself a poet, and I was never going to have a job and never serve the man. Back when the poetry slam was really big, and like that slam scene was constant, and in Phoenix, there was pretty much a poetry slam every night of the week that you could go to. And so I was early 20s, and probably George and Dave were also mid-early 20s. George was kind of the big, hardcore, Latino, badass poet. Laspaluto was more academic. He was going to college and would do, proof rock poetry and intellectual stuff. And I was just like kind of generic white dude poetry about my family and stuff like that, and girls. So the three of us all had different styles, but we loved performing together. We all loved the beats, and we were enthralled with taking some kind of a road trip. We all had our strengths to bring. I could publish books. Dave had a car, and George had street cred. So we could roll in anywhere, and we thought we were like, the super friends of poetry. So we concocted this scheme to make a book of all of our poetry. We decided to do a road trip book tour, and we called it 3 Poets, 1 Car. We printed out books on my laser printer, and then we chop them in half and then bind them Japanese style. So we had all these pretty cool books. The first part of the trip, we went to the Bisbee Poetry Festival, which I don't know how it is now, but back then the whole town was like taken over by poetry. And we'd been there a few times. So we roll in there. I don't think we were like actually invited anywhere, but there was a lot of open readings and stuff. We have this book, and I was like, this is gonna be the best fucking tour ever. Because I had more cash in my pocket than I ever had. Free beer, food, crashing at people's houses and stuff. And so it was just going to be great. Yeah, we spent, 2 or 3 days in Bisbee, just super psyched. And from then on, we were going to go to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle, and then work our way back down. And at that point, we were all just like, this is the best idea we've ever had. It was just so great. We leave Bisbee at night, drove all night to LA, and got there in the morning. The first stop was this coffee house owned by the brother of the guy who had Java Road. That was like a super supportive poetry place. So this guy's like, my brother's gonna hook you up. You're gonna have a great reading there. So we were psyched. So we pulled in, and there's no flyers up. There's no announcements or anything. And we talked to the people there, and they're like, nah, there's no reading tonight. And they call the dude. I can't remember if the owner was there or not. So he's like, oh, okay, we'll let you do this. So they set up they get their sound guy, and it's LA. It's everybody's fucking hipster. Nobody wants to hear any poetry at all. They apparently don't do poetry there. So we get up, and everybody's just kind of looking at us like, it's like when you're at a great place and then a really bad band comes on, and it's like really loud. You're just like, why are you doing this? Except we're not even a band. And as we're doing this, George gets pissed because he's just like, if anybody's like, fuck you, you need poetry in your life. So he's just pulling out his most angry shit, and we're doing round robin. That's how we do it. Like, we'd each do one. And I was just like, we're losing this crowd. And then we realized that the sound guy's been incrementally churning our sound down to where we're just being completely churned off. So then we all do the mic drops. Like, we're gonna break your microphone, and we just start shouting, and it's full antagonistic shit. And no, we're ready again to be like, we're gonna sell 20 copies of the book, we're gonna fucking get free food, we're gonna make out with chicks, and we're gonna go to the next town and do it all over again. So we're sitting there, and then we can see down this strip mall. It's like the corner of it, and I can see like a police helicopter coming in. I'm like, okay, it's LA. And then what happens is this U-Haul, like not the small kind, a huge fucking U-Haul, comes around the corner, just like barreling. And we're like, what? And then the copter has its spotlit, and it's barreling down, and then cop cars come behind it. And we're like, this is a police chase in the strip mall with the U-Haul, and the lights are on us. Like, it is coming, and I'm like, it is not gonna make this turn. And everybody else can see it too. So everybody gets up, and they're edging towards the safety of the wall. So we get off and all this stuff, and it barely makes the corner. Just squeals, comes around, the chopper goes by, the cops go by, and we're looking at each other like, now we're gonna go back up and start reading poetry again? Like, just like, this is an epic fail. We're done. We go inside, and we're like, asking for some food and stuff, and they charge us, and we're like, nah, we're not gonna eat here. Fuck you guys. And then I think we slept in the car. I can't remember what happened, but also I need to say that this car was a tiny hatchback, and George Tirado, rest in peace, is probably 300 pounds. So he was in the front seat constantly. And so when we slept in there, it was just, there was no way to spread out anyway. So then that was the point. I think I was the first to realize, like, this is going to be bad. Like, from here on out, like, I don't think it's going to be good. But George, who would often live in San Francisco, he's like, I got people, I got the connects, we got places to stay, we got great gigs, like, they love me there. The other thing about, and I can say this, he was open about this, that George was a junkie. So when he used heroin, he would be in San Francisco. He was like the full beat kind of dude. And he'd live in the Mission and just hardcore life. And then when he kind of got clean, he'd be in Phoenix. So he's like, I'm going to show you San Francisco. So we're like, okay, great. And I'm like, okay, we have some hope. We get there in the early morning. We were like quickly run out of money. It's like, I think we have no more income the rest of this. Like, we have days of travel in urban environments with no money. And so we get this cheap breakfast. We're sitting there, and it's full rush hour traffic, close to Mission, not know what street it was, all one way, 4 lanes of traffic. And a guy's being chased. He runs across traffic, and then 2 other guys from the other side come. They trap him, and they knife this guy right in front of us. Just knife him, and he goes down, and all the traffic stops, and I'm looking at George, and he's like, what are you gonna do? It's the Mission. And I'm like, should we do something? He's like, if you go out there, you're gonna get knifed. I'm like, oh. And these guys don't run. They look at all the cars like, I dare any of you to come out and do something. So I'm like, okay. And this guy just crawls down the road. Like, he just crawls out of sight. And I'm like, okay, like, here we go in San Francisco. It just keeps getting worse, our experience, and I could go on and on and on, but George is used to walking San Francisco. He's never been in a car. So one-way streets don't make sense to him. Hours of driving around. We go to where we can get some gigs, and they're like, you owe us money, George. Like, nope, you're not doing it here. So we spent all day spinning our wheels, literally. We're dead tired. At one point, we're in traffic, and I'm in the back. And there's all this honking, and I'm like, ah, man, San Francisco's a crazy town. And I look up, and both George and Dave are sleeping in the front. There's like a half-mile open lane of traffic in front of us. They're just out, and that's all the honking is like, you motherfuckers, like, drive. Finally, we get to this place. These people live there, and they had a huge warehouse. And George's like, we're going to stay here, and like, oh, it's going to be great. And like, they won't let us in at first. And finally we go in, and then he's like, well, we need a place to stay, blah, 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 and it's late. And they're like, absolutely not. Like, they won't let us use their bathroom, their shower. They won't feed us. They're all mad. Whatever George did, because he probably burned them pretty bad. So we have to sleep just out on the floor. And there's also like a big rave performance place. So it's all cement and like one kind of black platform stage. And George gets up there and he falls asleep. And then Dave and I, we have this kind of discussion of like, I don't think we can trust George the rest of this trip. Like, we're not betraying him, but it's like, reality check here, like, it's all a lie. Everything he says is a lie about how good it's going to be. And I don't think we're going to make any more money. And as we're having this conversation, we're kind of mad. We can hear this noise and we look over and everybody has like dogs that live there and they just roam this warehouse at night, like for safety, and it's their yard. And there's, I don't know, 3 dogs and they're just licking the sweat off of George, off of his body. Cause he's like, oh, big as sweat. He's hot as fuck in that place. And it's so disgusting and so charming. And we both look at each other and we're like, we're going to get so many good poems out of this trip. Like, that is a fucking gold right there. So I'm like, all right, let's start writing poetry and compare poems. We stayed there like maybe 2 days, went into readings where we weren't welcome. Always the readings were of a genre or style that no 3 of us met. So they were just like, why are you here? Why are you saying this? Like, we don't like your poetry. And we're all trying to like plug the book, and they're looking at it and just disgust. I'm just like, no. And then from there on, it was just a blur of like Portland, Seattle. It's very similar situations of like nothing ever worked out, always broke. And we're from Phoenix, and they were like Portland and Seattle people, and they knew their fucking poetry. And this is like, Nirvana, grunge, like they were the shit. And we were just these losers. And I think because we were all we were 3 very different type of people, so they couldn't figure out who we were. Because it was like guy doing brown heroin, yelling at white people for how fucking stupid they are. And then me doing fucking corn pone, like, here's a sweet thing about my grandma. And then Spluto is just all academic. So they're like, how are you doing this? So maybe 2 books out of like pity. No girls, no food, no nothing. And also the whole point is that we were going to do street poetry, and we tried it a few times, but like, no, it's just, that's why there's never street poets that last more than a week. Cause it's humiliating. Society, even people who love the arts are like, fuck, do not want to see. I will let somebody wash my windshield with their dirty, shitty underwear before I'll listen to their poem. Like, I will pay you to go away. But they wouldn't pay you to go away because it's just like, get a job. No, nobody likes poetry. So we just headed straight home, limping home with all our unsold books. We had a trunk full of books. I was done. I was like, because the other thing is we were going to hang around long enough to go to Lollapalooza. They went back up, but before they did Lollapalooza, they went into Canada to Vancouver. And George ran his big mouth when they crossed the border. They're like, do you have anything to declare? And he's like, yeah, we're poets and we have, 100 books. And the guy's like, how much are they worth? And he's like, they're worth $20. And he's like, okay, you owe us whatever the, tariff or whatever it's called. And he's like, no. And like, you're crossing the border and you can't pay for your product. Like, we're going to seize it. So they took all the books. We spent so much time printing these out on a laser printer and cutting them in half and sewing them with twine and all this shit. And so they get back and I'm like, how many books do you sell? And Dave's like, we didn't sell any. I'm like, okay, cool. We can sell them. Like, no, they're all stuck in Canada. And I'm like, oh my God. So all the work we did, we probably sold 20 books. I don't know, maybe 40 that are in existence. And all the rest are in Canada somewhere waiting release. And that was the end of our road trip and our joint literary career. And we thought we were the shit. We were the shit, but just to ourselves.
Awesome, hilarious story, Brian Flatgard. Thank you. I love a good road failure story. I hope everyone laughed as much as I did. So that brings us to the end of our first episode on the second season of Busker's Corner podcast called On the Road. One story about traveling out of the darkness and claiming your life, and another about a dream that just never materialized and could have turned very dark, but hilariously didn't.
Big thanks to both of our storytellers on this episode. If you'd like to keep up with Stephen Strange and Brian Flatgard, you'll find their links in the show notes. If you've enjoyed Busker's Corner podcast and would like to support this show, please share and tell all your friends about us. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and all our socials, where you can find us at Busker's Corner Podcast. It really means the world to us, so thank you.
Join us next time for episode 2, season 2, a new chilling and incredibly entertaining Halloween spectacular. But for now, you're stepping off Busker's Corner.